I mean, I was like, I can do this. This isn't hard to do, right? I'll just put the product on Amazon. And, I don't know exactly how to send it to people. So there was this thing called FBM. I didn't know what FBM was.
I would say one of the lessons that I'm taking away from this to go out of business quickly in e-commerce is not really understanding the true costs of a marketplace or strategy, right? Like you're just going and not really understanding like what are my actual costs, to be on Amazon, and fully breaking that down.
Basically just the front end sales channel. He developed a strategy because in his own business he wasn't profitable with the strategy.
It's clearly working wonders for our clients, and it's crazy to me how many agencies don't know about this at all. Hey, welcome to the E-commerce Leader Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Hamer, and today we have a special guest with us, Harold Anderson. Harold is a longtime CPG veteran, an e-commerce veteran, and is now serving as a fractional CFO and offers a bunch of services for e-commerce brands and CPG businesses. But with that, Harold, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks, Kyle. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and let the audience sort of get to know you, and also just your experience and kind of what you're doing right now with your practice.
Well, I've been involved in e-commerce, or really in CPG, before e-commerce even existed. So, e-commerce is a relatively new concept. If you exclude stuff like ordering from the Sears catalog, which is how people used to do, online or mail order commerce. So I started off about 2006, about 18 years ago, doing CPG. Actually in Sweden, in Europe, and did that for a while. I was also doing venture capital. I was investing with my own money and helping other companies raise money as an investment banker.
Wow.
When I came back to the US, and got interested in CPG, I met the founder of Oregon Chai, who had a big exit and also had a lot of e-commerce business with that product, and joined with her actually by investing in the company, and did that for about 7 years. And one of the things that we did was, trying to sell on Amazon and Instacart. So I learned quite a bit about e-commerce and the mistakes that you can make that way as well.
I love it. You have so much experience. And in this episode, I guess the title, what we're going to go after, I love, which are quick ways to go out of business in e-commerce. So these are sort of your school of hard knocks lessons learned in the trenches. And I'd love to sort of, pick your brain and have this conversation about what have you seen, what have you experienced, both within the businesses that you run, and then also obviously with clients that you work with. Like, what are some of the quickest ways that e-commerce businesses, hit walls, struggle, and have a tendency to go out of business?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer that correctly. I mean, directly.
Sure.
But, I would just say that, like anything, if you try to do this on your own, like, a lot of people start up CPG businesses, right? And they think, I want to sell something in grocery stores. It's going to be, or sell something to people. It's going to be great. And they start up a CPG company. I mean, anybody can do it. And then they say, oh, well, Amazon's really big. I'll just put it on Amazon, and you try and do it yourself.
Right.
And that's when you start to realize, it's like anything, right? You wouldn't try and build a house yourself, right? Sure. You'd hire a contractor, right? So the big thing that I'm trying to say here is, don't try and do it yourself. Pay somebody like Kyle, like Seller Sage, to do it. There's a lot of mistakes that you can make. And if you want to make all the mistakes, go ahead. But it's going to be painful, and you're going to lose a lot of money, right? So just a plug for your business.
Yeah, for sure.
I made a lot of mistakes trying to do it myself, right? I mean, we can go through them if you want.
Yeah, I'd love. Let's go. This is gold.
So, I mean, I was like, I can do this. This isn't hard to do, right? I'll just put the product on Amazon, and I don't know exactly how to send it to people. So there was this thing called FBM. I didn't know what FBM was. I mean, this is how clueless I was. But a lot of your listeners, well, probably some of them anyway, are just getting started and they're thinking, well, how do I do this? So yeah, first we were doing FBM, which means fulfilled by merchant. And we didn't know about FBA, which is fulfilled by Amazon, And so I didn't know that you could do both at the same time. All these things that you have to do, right? If you want to send the stuff to Amazon, to the client yourself, you have to be able to send it within a couple of days, right? To qualify for Prime. I mean, there's just a tremendous number of details that you have to understand to work with Amazon, not to mention it's making money, right? So there was that. I'm scared of the advertising because I'd never done it before. So just trying to understand Amazon advertising and the products that they offer, you need an expert to do it,
for sure.
Right? There's display advertising. I mean, must be 10 different types of advertising.
Yeah, they keep
right?
on adding more.
Yeah, right. Then after I decided, well, I'm going to do advertising, and I figured out how to get the product to Amazon myself. Now you have to figure out, well, what keywords are you gonna advertise for, and then how much are you going to bid for those keywords? And then I'm thinking, okay, well, what do I have to do? Monitor this manually myself?
Yeah.
Right. So then I figured, okay, well, maybe I can get some, PPC software, pay-per-click software. There's software that will help you, manage your keywords and the bids for those keywords, right? So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to listen to every episode, of a PPC podcast. I won't give a plug to one of your competitors here, but you might decide, well, maybe I could learn a lot by listening to every single episode of the Seller Sage podcast, the e-commerce leader podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, right? And Spotify. And you'll probably learn quite a bit, right? Eventually I gave up and was trying to search for software to help me with PPC advertising. And I ran into this guy that had basically gone through every single type of PPC software. I think there were like 45 of them in his spreadsheet. And finally ended up choosing, do you want me to say what I chose eventually? Okay, you probably use them too. I tried about 6 of them, and I finally decided to use Perpetua.
Okay.
Right? I don't even know if they exist anymore, but they seem pretty good. And this was like 3 years into the journey. So I'm really condensing it, right? I mean, I've been really struggling for 3 years at this point, right? And, eventually with Perpetua, I was able to build sales up to about $10,000 a month. It's about $3,000 a month was advertising, but I still wasn't making any money, right? And so I guess my overall reaction to Amazon was, well, maybe it'll help with, making a little with brand awareness, and overall sales, but I'm not going to make any money in this, right? So that's kind of my now this was a heavy product, right? We were selling, beverages, right? Which I think is tough.
Yeah, it's heavy. It's expensive to move.
Yeah. So eventually what happened was, I guess there were some negative reviews of the product, and Amazon decided that we needed to destroy our entire inventory because there must be something wrong with that batch. So they sent me a notice saying we had like a month to destroy our entire inventory. And, at that point, I basically just decided, well, if I'm going to lose that much money being on Amazon, there's just no reason to really do this, right? So how to quickly go out of business? I suppose there are ways to do it more quickly. That took about 4 years.
Sure.
to do.
That one, well,
right?
one of the ways to go out of business quickly is Amazon just destroys all of your inventory.
Yeah, if they tell us to destroy it.
Right.
And then eventually the last thing that happened after we were already off of Amazon, was that Amazon themselves decided to sell the product. Now, this is kind of reaching the limits of my knowledge about Amazon.
Sure.
But obviously they charge themselves better rates for, for fulfillment and shipping, right? So they were able to sell the exact same product for like half of what we were selling it for. Right? In other words, the fulfillment costs that I was paying Amazon, they're high, right? When you don't have to pay those, when you're Amazon, it seemed to me, I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah.
That there's like a 2-tier system. There are products that Amazon decides to sell themselves. Sure. And then there is everyone else who has to struggle with the fulfillment and shipping costs. And it was like dramatic. It's like a 50% difference.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
for sure. I think it's what's interesting about that too is I would say one of the lessons that I'm taking away from this to go out of business quickly in e-commerce is not really understanding the true costs of a marketplace or strategy, right? Like you're just going and not really understanding like what are my actual costs, to be on Amazon and fully breaking that down. And I think that from their standpoint, like they have the Seller Central, the three, what they call 3P, which is,
right,
what we were doing before. And they have the vendor side, which is 1P, right? And so Amazon's buying it either from another distributor or from another, wholesaler that's, taking that product and reselling it. And so there's a couple of things that are happening. One is they're typically negotiating down all to a wholesale price, right, that they want. But there's a bunch of other fees that sort of get factored in that they sort of optimize for to their advantage. And then the other piece of that is, when you're on the 3P side through Seller Central, you essentially are paying them 15% as their referral fee, right, that Amazon takes right off the top. It doesn't matter on every sale. Could be an organic sale. Could be the customer could have bought from you 100 times. You're still going to pay 15% on that transaction. And so they obviously have that margin baked in on the vendor side, plus more. And then they're also okay to eat shipping costs. Like they will eat sometimes that cost, right, of shipping so that they can get it down to what they want it to, or they'll just write it off, right? So they have the ability, and you'll even see this even with pricing. If they have inventory that they bought from a vendor, they'll cut the price down to whatever it takes to try and move that inventory out if it's going slow. And, they just write it off. And then what happens is over time, if that continues to be, there's a price point that they find that moves the product and it's cheaper, then they go back to the vendor and renegotiate with them on lower wholesale rates to kind of show like, oh, this is actually what the product should be priced at because this is what it's sold for. Another thing that I'm going to mention is at that particular time that Costco, that Amazon did that, right? Cut the price, right, decided to sell it themselves. There was something else going on, which was we were actually selling the product at Costco, sure, and even on Costco.com. Okay. Now, I believe that Amazon really, really cares about what's going on Costco.com, Walmart.com, and Target. And if they see that they're 2.5 times the price of any one of those other platforms, I think they take action. Yeah. I might, No, they do 100%. In fact, they call it a pricing error. And what happens is that your product, you know how you have your little buy box on your product page, has your ability to add to cart, has your seller information. Well, they just collapse that down to where it says see all buying options, right? There's no buy box with your price and stuff like that. And they call it a pricing error. And then you can click into it. You have to do another extra click or two to actually get to close out that product. And what that does is impact the conversion rate, obviously, of that product. And then they'll come back and say, hey, we found that this was not priced competitively, And so we just found it as an error. It must be an error pricing wise, but it's not matched up with what we were selling.
A pricing error. I mean, there's a reason that it was a lot cheaper on Costco.com.
Yeah.
I mean, Costco buys by the truckload.
Yeah, exactly.
They pick it up themselves, and they're very efficient, and they put a very small markup on it.
Yep.
Right? You know, Amazon is, charging a lot more, as we've just.
Sure. Yeah, no, exactly. 100%. So I think it's super interesting. And it's interesting too how different sales channels have different variable, cost structures to that. And then at the end, you have to kind of understand, well, what does this sort of come out at on my bottom line, and really sort of optimize and get clarity on what's the best.
Right. So I kind of wonder how people make money. I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm excited to know you and to work with you and Seller Sage with my clients is, from my point of view, it's I obviously have not been as successful as you have on Amazon. So I'm excited to learn, what the elements of success look like. And obviously people are making money on Amazon because it's a shocking statistic. Amazon is actually the largest retailer in the country.
Yeah.
Even larger than Walmart.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously, people are able to make money. I'm sure a lot of your clients do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it really just depends on the type of product, how much demand's on the platform. There's a lot of variables that go into it, right? But getting super clear on, what the opportunity looks like, trying to understand what the cost structures look like going into it is an important step. Like, you really want to understand that for sure. So I would say mistake number one is not getting good help, right? That's one quick way to do it. Yeah. Step number two is not really clearly understanding all of the cost structures that are kind of built into a marketplace. Definitely for the Amazon. In terms of maybe say your direct to consumer website, did you kind of lean into that direction after you got off of Amazon? What was your path and journey with that?
No, we didn't. We never sold direct to consumer, and the reason was, the FBM, right? But the reason was that one thing that Amazon has going for it is this incredible shipping costs, right? And so if you're going to do the fulfillment and the shipping yourself, which is what Shopify, you have to do with Shopify, or hire somebody else to do it, right? Yep. I mean, the prices they charged were crazy. I mean, there was one. This will be a good tidbit for your listeners. A product that we were selling for say $50, the freight was like $200 to Alaska, right? So I was selling product for $50 and then paying $200 freight to Alaska. So whenever people ask me about direct to consumer, that's what I always think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen clients before too have stuff turned on to Palau and American Samoa, and I was like, you really want to ship to these locations? Because if they buy it, you're either gonna have to cancel that order and refund them, or figure out a way to ship it to them if you're gonna try and ship it. Right.
So we essentially just sold in retail.
Okay.
Right. So everything was retail or brick and mortar.
Sure.
Right. And the reason that brick and mortar is popular is because of the economics of getting it to the store and on the shelves, and then people come and pick it up, which is much better than having to ship it to them for $200, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And most of CPG, e-commerce is definitely growing, and you would know what percentage it is of the overall retail market. But brick and mortar is still.
It's still the big.
Over 80%.
It's the big dog. COVID obviously was this weird aberration where you saw a lot of stuff shift online because it had to, but that's sort of renormalized after, everything sort of went back to, normal operations. Brick and mortar still moving.
Where is it now? Around 15% for e-commerce, or is it lower?
I think it really just depends on the sort of the niche, right?
The product?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it kind of really just depends on what you're looking at as a whole.
For ready to drink beverages, I can't imagine that it would be 10%. Are 10% of Cokes sold on Amazon? I I don't know. But maybe like iPhone cases, sure.
Yeah. It's really, I would say it ranges anywhere between 15 to 20%.
Really?
Yeah. So you're still looking at probably 80% brick and mortar for overall total sales.
Overall, right? But some niches like iPhone cases, maybe it's higher than that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, Amazon, I think I saw a statistic that 600 million products were sold on Amazon.
Yeah, a lot. They definitely move a lot, for sure.
I mean, 600 million different SKUs.
Yeah, they have it. There's a lot. And part of that's sort of the challenge, right? It's like when you're having this conversation about where should your product live, like where do you want it to be found? I mean, obviously brick and mortar has a ton of competition and shelf space, and you're trying to compete there. But when you're competing against, thousands and thousands and thousands of products in that particular category on Amazon, it's different. And it's also digital. So one of the long-standing, I would say, challenges of e-commerce is discoverability. So it is, especially on a marketplace like Amazon or Walmart, is discovering those your product right there. Now, if it's on your direct-to-consumer website, obviously you have traffic there, they see it, it's pretty straightforward. In the store, you have a more limited discoverability because you do have the shelf space and there are competitors there, but it's not thousands of competitors. It's a very select, hand-picked amount, right? And so you can pick up the product, you can see it, you can get discoverability of the product. And I think that is one of the net benefits to brick and mortar, other than the one you mentioned earlier, which is sort of shipping in bulk, and you can go in quantity and kind of lower your cost per unit in that way. I do think brick and mortar adds a layer of discoverability to your brand and to your product that, that's harder to generate, particularly online. And even now, more so, as we get ready to go into 2025, social media, TikTok, and all those places are driving a ton of traffic, but you're competing with, bunch of other brands and a bunch of other content creators to sort of gain visibility of eyeballs on a product, and it just makes it more and more expensive to do. And I think that one of the beautiful things about brick and mortar is that level of discoverability for your CPG, that if you are doing direct to consumer on a website or even on Amazon, right? It's a very common sort of customer practice and habit to be in store looking at a product, and then they'll be like, oh, I'm just going to pop open my phone, go on the Amazon app and see if Amazon has it and what the price is, right? Or I'll look for reviews. Sure. I'm looking at reviews on Amazon to make a buying decision. And so there's this interplay between sort of brick and mortar experience, sort of the Amazon and even the D2C site over time as well, that I think is really interesting to how that interplays.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I used to live in England, in a town in England, and this was when Amazon was really starting to create an effect. And I remember Amazon put a lot of stores out of business. Yeah. Actually, for that reason, right? They would go to the store, and shoppers would go to the store, and then they'd open their Amazon app and see that they could get the same product for less on Amazon. And so people weren't shopping at the stores anymore. I remember, eventually there were signs on the store saying, sarcastically, "Thank you for shopping at Amazon," right? Because we're out of business now. Yeah. But hey, it's the business world, right?
That is how it works. That's why there's only one Blockbuster left standing. Even that may not even be the case now. At one point, there was one left in the entire country.
Yeah. Things change.
Yeah, you gotta have to adapt to it. But it's interesting too, how things sort of cycle back, because I do think that there is a place for brick and mortar for sort of getting out, and people want to be sort of in that experience. It's like even with taking my kids, we just like to go to the mall, walk around, see what's out there, right? And just kind of be out and about together, kind of checking things out. And so I don't think that's ever going to go away, even with e-commerce. There's just kind of visceral, just going someplace and experiencing something and seeing what's there. Now, there is definitely the ease of e-commerce at times, especially if you find stuff, or maybe if you're living in some place that's a little bit more remote and you don't have stuff as close or easily accessible. ordering it, even if you're paying more for it, allows you to have that product in, a few days, as opposed to not even have access to it, which I think is something that's really kind of a powerful thing.
Mail order, right? That's how Sears got started in the 1800s.
Sure.
Right? People couldn't go to the city, and they were living on the farms, and they could get like a metal, a cast iron stove delivered to them, and somebody would truck it out to their farm. And Sears became the big dog in retailing.
They did.
For sure. But I mean, with food, right? And the price is lower than it is on Amazon, right? Sure. I mean, my product you could buy for much less, because Amazon is charging so much for fulfillment. So if you can buy it for less on Amazon, maybe the stores are going to go out of business. If you can buy it for less in the stores, then people aren't going to buy it on Amazon. It might just be that simple.
Yeah, and it's definitely tighter margin. You think about like Walmart. Walmart still crushes Amazon when it comes to the grocery segment. Like, hands down, just destroys Amazon. Because one of the things that they can do is they'll run tighter margin on sort of staple products, right? They might only make a couple of cents even on some of the products that they sell through Walmart, but they have like it's the cart mentality. It's like you're going to go and pick up and fill up your cart, and you might pick up a bunch of other higher margin products along with some of these staples that you only make maybe a few cents on, right? And so you get that sort of average order value much higher when you're checking out. And the same way with Costco, right? It's the reason why Costco doesn't do small items, right? Like, they only do jumbo, big packs of things, because there's better margin in it. And so when you kind of have that mentality, you typically have cheaper products in the grocery niche for sure, when you're shopping the aisles of Walmart, for that very reason. Is that they have a very clear path in terms of how they want to build average order value. And if they come in cheaper staples where their margins are lower, knowing that there's a higher likelihood that people are going to add to cart and pick up stuff that are higher margin, more profitable for them, then at the net at the end of that year, they're making money and they're profitable.
For sure. Absolutely.
It's super interesting. So, so we talked about a couple of things. So a couple of the ways, just a quick recap, that e-commerce brands can go out of business. One is they just don't get the right professional help. Like, they're struggling with some of this stuff. I would say, two, they're not really quite understanding their cost structures. What are some other ways, maybe mistakes you've seen clients make, where it's just like, this is a really important point for you to have long-term survivability as an e-commerce brand?
The biggest thing is just get some help, right? Just to hire somebody who actually knows what they're doing, but then also making sure that the fee that you're paying them, that you're making money overall, even considering the fee that you're paying. I've worked with some clients, and we've asked for bids from, some of your competitors, and they just conveniently forget to include their fee in the margin, and they say, "See, your margins are still pretty good." Well, not if you actually, you have to, as a CFO, right? I kind of look at the bottom line. If my clients don't make money, they're going to be out of business, and I'm going to be out of business, right?
100%. You have to factor in all the costs. It goes back to
someone who's honest, right? So you want to deal with somebody who's honest, and somebody who's going to include their own costs, right?
100%.
In that, right? And I've seen there are a lot of Amazon companies out there, and you can't just hire any of them. You have to hire somebody who's going to, actually do the calculation, like you said.
That factor in all the costs, to kind of look at everything holistically, and really sort of put yourself. The biggest thing too is like, just put yourself in the shoes of the brand owner, the business owner, right? Like, that's kind of my philosophy. Is like, well, if I was in their position, what would I want out of the deal? And then kind of build it and structure it in a win-win sort of scenario. And that's ultimately what we try to do. And in some cases, you can't bring that together. Like, they're too far afield, they're too small, or they're not quite have enough traction where it makes sense. And then from that standpoint, you're like, okay, well, this is what I would do to help. These are the actions that I would take to try and gain momentum, so you can bring in people, you can be lean, you can kind of be focused on on getting to a certain level where you can then bring people in. Because, when you're first starting out, hiring anybody, hiring anybody who has skill and being, professional and bringing that level into the business, can be expensive. It's like you're just getting going. You have to kind of get product market fit, and kind of understand who your, customer is and how your product sort of serves them at a high level and what your branding needs to be and how that all kind of connects. And then once you kind of get that laid out and you have a deeper understanding with it, then it lets you sort of target that customer, really start to generate the sales behind it, which then allows you to have a little bit more capital to go out and, talk to bringing in people in to help you kind of scale to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what to say.
That's good. That's good stuff.
About that, yeah, but you definitely, I would just say you mentioned product market fit. And I assume most people who are listening to this probably already have a product, right? But, I just want to say, most CPG companies go out of business, something like 85%, right? And, the number one reason they go out of business is not because they're making all these mistakes that I made on Amazon, right? It's lack of product market fit.
Yeah, 100%.
So if nobody wants your product, right? No matter what you do, no matter how smart you are, no matter how much money you have, your company is going to fail.
Yep.
Right? Unless you decide to sell another product, right? Pivot.
Yep.
But understanding whether somebody wants your product is the most important thing that you can do before you start selling it.
Yep. Yeah, it reminds me of that. It's the Seth Godin quote, right? He says, "Don't find customers for your products, find products for your customers." And a lot of times we kind of we like, I have this great product idea. Now I got to go find the customers that I want for the product. But in reality, you got to flip it, and you have to really think, well, who are my customers, and then what do they need, and then build those products for them.
Yeah, Y Combinator's motto is 4 words: build something people want. Yeah. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's where even narrowing down your niche, like if you're like just getting started, people always come and I've talked with clients before, and they're like, I'm going to do this XYZ. I'm going to do this brand for women's fashion. I was like, well, women's fashion is very broad. Do you want to go a little bit narrower? And like, no, we're going to serve everybody. I'm like, well, you're not. You got to bring it down even more. And then, and then usually try to take it down 2 or 3 levels if you can, because getting started, you have to get super clear. And the more you can sort of niche down, the easier it is for you to sort of set up your guide rails, right? If you're going to do any level of advertising, the copy that you're writing, just making sure that you are locked in to who you're trying to serve. And then over time, if it makes sense, then you can look to expand. But even in some cases, it's like, as long as your niche is big enough to we're often surprised on, you think, oh, this niche is too small. But if you think about as many people are on the internet and shopping and looking for things, it's big enough to actually have a really good business out of, right?
Sure.
And so right. I tell people, like, get super niche down, take it down, keep taking it down level to level, even more niche, until you can really find the pain points and have the conversations with those particular customers to make sure that this is a product that actually does serve them and really meets a need or is providing value at some level for them.
Especially online, right? So, if Amazon is selling 600 million different products, right? That means that, their audience is so large that there's an audience for, things I would never want to buy. I can't even believe they're on Amazon, right? But somebody was interested. It's selling, right? So there's an audience for everything, I guess, right?
For sure.
For every product on Amazon, or it wouldn't be there.
Yeah. Well, Amazon gets about 3.4 billion visits a month to their website. So
insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they have sell all those products because they have so much traffic. Yeah.
Eventually, you can also, I don't know, as far as knowing who your audience is before you start selling. Ideally, but you can find audiences that you didn't really even know.
That's true.
Maybe you didn't even know. I always think, like, I think the audience, the target customer for Red Bull, I've heard is a 15-year-old boy. I think I heard that somewhere. I wonder if the guy who started Red Bull knew that was who his audience was going to be when he created the product. Probably not. So sometimes you learn things about your audience, Amazon gives you that information about demographics and gender and things like that.
Yeah.
You can kind of learn who your audience is over time.
For sure, you will, and it'll adapt and change. You're going to get clarity. I heard, I think it was Frank Kern, who's like his internet marketer, and he said something. I quote about audience, and he said, there's 3 different types of audiences in your business. There's the audience that you want, the customer that you want. There's the customer that you think you have, and then there's the customer that you actually have. And oftentimes, they're distinctly different.
I mean, a lot of times I've hired marketing people in the past, and marketing people often think, unless they're really good, they'll think, oh, well, the customer for that product is somebody just like me, right? Just like them. But it's not, right? They're projecting themselves onto the customer, right? They don't really know who's buying this product.
Sure.
And that's dangerous.
It can be for sure. I've also seen it go the other way, where you have a founder who has an idea for a product, but she literally built this product because she wanted it, and she was the target audience. And so she was able to kind of speak into that as her target audience because it was for her and people like her. And so I saw that work out really, really well, because she just kind of zoned everybody else out and I am my own target audience. These are five really attributes that I take and I kind of built my product to serve my needs, and realized that there's plenty of other people, women like me, that are in that same boat. So I'm going to go after them and kind of target them, and it's worked pretty well for her.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to say is that, your first conception of the product may not work.
That's true.
Right? You have to listen to the market and change your product in response to what the market is asking for. Yeah. Right? So it could be something as simple as a different pack size, right? Oh, we didn't want to buy a quart. We wanted to buy a 1.5 gallon bag and box, right? Or we want to buy ready to drink, or we wanted a different flavor. So you really have to listen and be nimble. You have to be ready to pivot. To change your product offering. If you're offering something the market doesn't want, you're going to be out of business. So listen to the market, make changes to your product offering. You may have to even choose a completely different product.
It's so true, because even Twitter, right? Twitter actually wasn't the initial product that they started with, right? It was they actually weren't a podcasting company. And then, they did a podcasting company called Audio. And then Apple announced that they were going to integrate podcasting into iTunes, and their whole business model was going to get blown up overnight. And that's when Jack Dorsey, who was a programmer, said, well, what about this idea of a platform where you could share short sort of status updates in real time? And that's how they did. And they created this internal tool that they used to kind of communicate. And that eventually became Twitter.
Right. Similar story with Slack, wasn't it?
For sure. Yeah, exactly. So, you end up kind of pivoting over time and figuring that out, which I think it's super, super insightful and the right thing to do. You have to be nimble in sort of making tweaks with that. But awesome. Well, this has been great, Harold. I'd love to sort of also let people know, or have you explain to people how to get in touch with you and kind of what you do now. You're not doing direct CPG management anymore. You're now sort of serving as a role as a fractional CFO. So if you can talk a little about what you do and services and where people can find you, that'd be great.
Well, so just like you can make a lot of mistakes in e-commerce, and you really need to hire an expert in e-commerce, which I would advise, all my customers to do. There are a lot of other mistakes that you can make in CPG, in general, with how you create your company, or cash flow modeling, or how your relationships with distributors. They're a way that a lot of customers are very scared of dealing with distributors. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to you're going to get talked into stuff that you shouldn't be talked into. But some of my customers are just really afraid to even expand at all because they just are afraid of dealing with distributors, right?
Sure.
So, my goal as a fractional CFO is to keep people on track and to lead them through all these minefields so they don't make these mistakes, right? At least in CPG, that's the goal. CPG is an incredibly complex business with the distributors and, manufacturing your own product and dealing with co-manufacturers. I would recommend hiring somebody who's done all that. And that's the service that I offer.
That's super cool.
So to get a hold of me, just, you can go to my website. I don't know if you're going to have it on the
we'll stick it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, so just contact me through my website.
I love it.
It's in the show notes.
Well, Harold, this has been really awesome. I appreciate your insight and all of the wisdom bestowed on the listeners. Definitely there are landmines to avoid. There's challenges. Even if you get great advice, you're still going to deal with challenges and headwinds that you have to overcome, and that's just part of the nature of business. But if we can kind of help people sort of think about some of those obvious ones and be aware of them, that you're going in with your eyes wide open as opposed to just getting blindsided. Sometimes that's all you can do, and that's what we're hoping to do with our content.
It increases your chances of success.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and a subscribe on the listening platform of your choice. And with that, we're going to sign off, and we will talk to you all later. Thanks again, Harold.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.